They were the envy of the world. Wealth, power, and a picture-perfect family. But behind closed doors, a forbidden affair between a mother and her own son festered in silence. And when the truth was finally exposed, it triggered a deadly chain of events, leading to the brutal murder of one of Ohio's most powerful tycoons. The shocking betrayal that tore apart a family, one secret, one act of violence, forever changed everything. Before we dive into this shocking case, hit that like button and subscribe to True Crime Files HQ for more chilling tales of betrayal, power, and the secrets that destroy lives. On March 2, 2023, Ethan Holden, a 15-year-old student, was introduced to the public as the charming and well-mannered heir to the Holden fortune. Known for his polished demeanor, Ethan had always lived a life steeped in privilege, with every aspect of his existence carefully curated to reflect the elite status his family had attained over the years. As the son of Charles Holden, a self-made billionaire, Ethan's life was one of luxury and ease, with his name constantly appearing in the media alongside his family's empire. The Holden family, while private, was a fixture of public admiration. Charles Holden, a visionary entrepreneur, had built his multi-million-dollar business empire from the ground up. His sharp business acumen and tireless work ethic had earned him a respected reputation in Ohio, where he was celebrated not only for his wealth but also for his philanthropy. He was a community leader, often photographed at charity events, his image synonymous with success. Sylvia Holden, his wife, was the quintessential picture of grace. At 45, she was still strikingly beautiful, her presence both elegant and understated. As a devoted mother and wife, Sylvia was often seen attending high-profile events with her family, always in the spotlight as the supportive spouse of one of the most powerful men in the state. She had built a reputation as a champion of traditional family values, her social media platforms filled with posts about raising children, community involvement, and the importance of family. She projected the image of a loving, serene mother and wife, admired by her followers for her poise and commitment to family. From the outside, the Holden family seemed to embody the American dream, a life full of luxury, success, and respect. The family's public image was flawless, often shared across social media where photos from vacations, charity galas, and family milestones painted a portrait of a perfect existence. This carefully crafted image was exactly what the Holdens wanted the world to see, a life free of controversy, a family untouched by scandal. Their carefully maintained privacy seemed to reinforce the idea of their perfection, but behind the walls of their mansion, things were far from what they appeared. Despite their image of perfection, the Holden family was about to face a storm of secrets that would unravel everything. What had been hidden behind the perfect smiles and the golden public image would soon be exposed in a way no one could have foreseen. On June 12, 2023, the Holden family's seemingly perfect life took a dark turn that would later come to light in a shocking series of events. Ethan Holden, a 15-year-old student and heir to the family fortune, became entangled in a secret that would shatter the Holden legacy. Known for his charm and polished public persona, Ethan was often seen as the golden child, his life a reflection of the family's privilege and power. Behind closed doors, however, his relationship with his mother, Sylvia Holden, would become a source of scandal and devastation. Sylvia, 45, had long been regarded as the epitome of grace and poise. Married to Charles Holden, a self-made billionaire and respected community figure, she seemed to have it all, a lavish lifestyle, a beautiful home, and a family adored by the public. Yet, beneath the surface, Sylvia struggled with feelings of emotional neglect. Charles, engrossed in his business empire, was often absent, leaving Sylvia to manage the family's public image and private life alone. By late spring of 2023, her growing isolation had begun to take a toll. By early May, Sylvia and Ethan's relationship had taken a concerning turn. What began as late-night conversations and emotional support escalated into something far more troubling. On May 15, 2023, during a quiet evening at the family's estate, Ethan confessed feelings to his mother that went far beyond the boundaries of a traditional parent-child relationship. Witnesses later described Sylvia as conflicted and withdrawn in the weeks following this incident. Despite her apparent reservations, the relationship between mother and son deepened. In a series of private encounters, starting on May 20, 2023, Sylvia and Ethan's interactions crossed into a forbidden and destructive realm. Text messages and journal entries obtained later would reveal the growing intensity of their connection. Both parties appeared to justify their actions through a shared sense of emotional abandonment, with Sylvia lamenting her husband's neglect and Ethan expressing a desperate need for affection and attention. Throughout June, the affair grew increasingly obsessive. Ethan became possessive, isolating himself from friends and family. Sylvia, on the other hand, appeared increasingly torn between guilt and desire. Witnesses noted changes in her behavior, describing her as anxious and distracted during public appearances with Charles. The secrecy surrounding their relationship only fueled the intensity of their bond. Charles Holden, oblivious to the turmoil brewing in his home, continued to focus on his business and public engagements. His trust in his wife and son was unwavering, and he failed to notice the signs of distress within his family. Investigators later noted that Charles's frequent absences and lack of engagement at home created the environment in which the affair was able to flourish undetected. By the end of June, tensions within the Holden household had reached a boiling point. The affair, now a dangerous and toxic secret, was taking its toll on both Sylvia and Ethan. Surveillance footage and testimony from household staff would later provide key evidence of the increasingly volatile nature of their interactions. Ethan's obsession with his mother and Sylvia's inability to sever ties with her son created a powder keg that was poised to explode. What happened next would leave an indelible mark on the Holden family and the public perception of their seemingly perfect life. As the investigation unfolded, the details of their forbidden relationship would shock a community and reveal the dark truth behind the facade of the Holden legacy. This case, a tragic mix of power, betrayal, and secrecy, would serve as a grim reminder of the cost of hidden truths. It was the evening of July 14, 2023, when Charles Holden returned home unexpectedly early after a grueling week of high-stakes meetings. The sprawling Holden estate was unusually quiet, with Sylvia nowhere in sight. Exhausted but craving the comfort of his family, Charles went to his private study to unwind. As he reached for his tablet to check emails, an unfamiliar sound interrupted him, a series of notification pings from Sylvia's phone, left unattended on the desk. Curiosity turned to concern as Charles glanced at the screen. The preview of the messages caught his attention immediately, words of affection and longing that seemed shockingly inappropriate. His brows furrowed as he unlocked the device, a growing sense of dread filling his chest. What he found there made his blood run cold. The text messages were explicit, detailing not only the physical aspects of the affair but also the emotional connection between Sylvia and Ethan. They painted a picture of a relationship that had been ongoing for months, one that was deeply personal and devastatingly real. Charles read in stunned silence, each message like a blow, his hands trembling as the reality of what he was seeing set in. The weight of betrayal hit him like a tidal wave. His wife, the woman he had loved, trusted, and built a life with, had been having an affair. But the ultimate horror came with the realization of who the affair was with, Ethan, his own son. The depth of the deception was incomprehensible, leaving Charles frozen in disbelief, his mind struggling to reconcile the facts. Charles stormed out of the study, his face red with fury, his heart pounding. He found Sylvia in the living room, calmly sipping a glass of wine, unaware of what was coming. He confronted her immediately, his voice trembling with rage as he demanded answers. Sylvia's eyes widened in shock and fear as she realized what he had discovered. She tried to take the phone from his hand, but Charles held it out of her reach, demanding an explanation. At first, she tried to deny it, stammering out excuses, but the evidence was too damning. The floodgates opened, and Sylvia broke down, confessing everything. Through sobs, she told him how it had started innocently, late-night talks that had grown more intimate over time. She explained how she had felt neglected, How Charles's constant focus on his business had left her feeling invisible. Her voice wavered as she tried to justify her actions, claiming that she never intended for it to escalate into a physical affair. But her excuses only fueled Charles's rage. "You betrayed me," he bellowed, his voice echoing through the room. "You betrayed this family, and you betrayed our son. How could you do this?" His words were a mixture of fury and heartbreak, the betrayal cutting deeper than he ever thought possible. Sylvia, desperate to defend herself, tried to shift the blame onto her emotional isolation. "You were never there, Charles," she cried. "I was lonely, I was desperate for someone to care. And Ethan, he needed me too. We didn't plan this, it just happened." Charles's anger turned to Ethan. "He's a grown man," he roared. "Don't you dare make him out to be some victim. He knew what he was doing, and so did you." Sylvia's next words stopped him cold. "Don't you dare put all of this on him," she said, her voice trembling but defiant. "We were both at fault. He's your son, but he's also human. He needed someone, and so did I. You weren't there for either of us." Her defense of Ethan was the final straw. Charles erupted in rage, his fists clenching as he paced the room, struggling to contain his emotions. The betrayal had not only shattered his trust but had also upended his identity as a father and husband. The people he loved most in the world had conspired in the ultimate act of treachery, and he was left reeling, consumed by anger and despair. As the confrontation escalated, Sylvia begged for forgiveness, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. Charles was inconsolable, his world collapsing around him. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him, leaving Sylvia sobbing and alone. Upstairs, Ethan had heard every word, the walls of the mansion unable to contain the fury and heartbreak of his father's discovery. The stage was set for the explosive events that would soon follow, tearing the Holden family apart in ways no one could have imagined. It was July 16, 2023, 2 days after the explosive confrontation that had shattered the Holden family's fragile facade. The atmosphere in the mansion was suffocating, the silence of the opulent house broken only by the muffled sounds of footsteps echoing in empty hallways. Charles Holden, still reeling from the discovery of his wife's affair with his own son, summoned Ethan to his study. His mind was clouded with fury, unable to contain the seething betrayal that had consumed him. Sylvia, standing nearby, could only watch in terror, her body frozen by guilt and fear. When Ethan entered, the tension between father and son was palpable. Charles, consumed by rage, glared at his son, his voice low and dangerous. "You disgust me," he spat, his voice a venomous whisper that only added to the weight of the moment. "How could you betray me like this? Your own mother. What kind of man does that?" Ethan stood frozen for a moment, a mix of shame and defiance flashing across his face. "You abandoned her," he shot back. His voice cracked with emotion, as the years of emotional neglect bubbled to the surface. "You abandoned us," he continued, his eyes wild with frustration. "You were too busy with your precious empire to see what she needed, or what I needed." Charles's face turned crimson with fury, the veins in his neck pulsing with every word that left his mouth. "Don't you dare try to justify this," he growled, advancing on his son. "You've destroyed this family. You're no son of mine." The insult hit Ethan like a slap across the face. In an instant, the dam broke. He lunged at his father, shoving him back in a violent attempt to break free of the suffocating anger. The two collided, fists flying as years of pent-up resentment poured out in a brutal struggle. Sylvia, standing at the doorway, screamed, her voice panicked, "Stop. Please, stop this." But neither man heard her. Their fight was a primal force, raw and uncontrollable, crashing through the room. They knocked over bookshelves, overturned furniture, and shattered glass from a decorative mirror as they grappled, each blow adding fuel to the fire of their conflict. Amidst the chaos, Ethan's hand brushed against the jagged remnants of the broken mirror. His fingers closed around the sharp shard of glass, the jagged edge catching the light as it pressed into his palm. Fear and adrenaline surged through him. In that moment, he was no longer thinking, only reacting. Charles, relentless in his anger, moved toward Ethan again, his fists raised. But Ethan, desperate to defend himself, swung the glass shard wildly. It cut through the air, connecting with Charles's throat in a flash of madness. The force of the blow was swift and brutal. Charles's eyes widened in shock, his hand instinctively reaching for his throat as blood poured from the wound, staining his crisp white shirt a deep crimson. His mouth opened in a silent scream, but no sound came. He stumbled backward, his knees buckling beneath him. A final gasp of air escaped his lungs as he crumpled to the floor in a heap of blood and disbelief. Sylvia's scream pierced the silence that followed. "Charles," she cried, her voice shrill with terror. She rushed toward him, her hands hovering over his motionless body, but she couldn't bring herself to touch him. The blood spread across the floor, pooling around him, staining the pristine white carpet. Ethan stood above his father's body, his face pale, his hands trembling. Blood covered his palms, the shard of glass still clutched tightly in his fingers. He stared down at the lifeless form of the man who had been his father, a mixture of horror, disbelief, and regret clouding his mind. "What have I done?" he whispered, his voice barely audible, trembling with the weight of the moment. Sylvia, paralyzed by the shock, looked at her son with wide, haunted eyes. "What have you done? What have we done?" Her voice cracked, but she quickly regained composure, her desperation taking hold. "We can't let anyone know. We have to fix this." Ethan, his mind spinning, looked at his mother in disbelief. "What do you mean? Fix this? He's dead." The words felt foreign on his tongue. Sylvia's gaze was sharp, and her voice took on a cold edge, as though she had already begun to compartmentalize the horror they had just committed. "We have to make it look like a burglary. We have to make it look like someone broke in and killed him." For a moment, Ethan simply stared at her, disbelief hanging in the air between them. But his fear, his overwhelming terror of the consequences, slowly replaced his shock. He nodded, a numb, mechanical response, as if the gravity of the situation had yet to fully sink in. Together, they began to stage the scene. Sylvia knocked over furniture, scattering papers from the desk, making it look as though the room had been ransacked. She pulled open drawers and carelessly tossed the contents onto the floor, adding to the illusion of a violent struggle. Ethan, still shaking, picked up a nearby chair and hurled it through the window, the sound of glass shattering filling the room like the echo of their doom. When they were finished, the study looked like the aftermath of a botched robbery. The broken window, the overturned furniture, the scattered items, it was a carefully crafted illusion. But no amount of staging could erase the bloodstains on the floor or the weight of their actions. The reality of what had happened still hung over them, suffocating and inescapable. Sylvia stood in the middle of the room, taking in their work with a cool, calculating gaze. "We'll tell the police we were upstairs," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We heard a noise, and when we came down, he was already gone." Ethan nodded numbly, his mind reeling, his body still shaking. He couldn't comprehend it all, but he knew one thing for certain: there was no going back. As they prepared to call the authorities, neither of them could shake the feeling that their lives, like Charles's, were now irrevocably destroyed. The morning of July 18, 2023, marked the beginning of what would become one of the most sensational crime stories in the history of Ohio. The news of Charles Holden's brutal murder spread like wildfire, sending ripples of shock and disbelief through the tight-knit community. The Holden family, once viewed as the epitome of success and elegance, was now thrust into the heart of a media storm. Headlines splashed across every news outlet, each one more scandalous than the last. The Holden mansion, once a symbol of wealth and prestige, now stood as a grim backdrop to a family torn apart by betrayal. The media quickly descended, reporters and photographers camped outside the gates, eager to catch any glimpse of the surviving family members. Sylvia Holden, the once glamorous wife and mother, found herself thrust into the spotlight in the worst possible way. Her carefully curated Instagram, once filled with images of family vacations and charity galas, was now flooded with condolences and comments from followers who couldn't help but speculate about the true circumstances surrounding Charles's death. Many of Sylvia's followers, who had admired her seemingly perfect life, expressed their shock and grief, but whispers of doubt began to grow louder. There were rumors of an affair, rumors of family secrets too dark to be exposed. Some of Sylvia's closest friends and fans began questioning the nature of her relationship with Charles, especially in light of the revelations that emerged following his death. Social media erupted with conspiracy theories, some claiming that Sylvia had orchestrated her husband's murder, while others suggested that Ethan, her own son, had been the mastermind. The media, hungry for answers, began digging deeper. The initial reports, carefully constructed by the Holden family, painted a picture of a tragic home invasion gone wrong, a robbery that turned deadly. Broken windows, a ransacked study, and a trail of destruction were all part of the carefully staged scene that Sylvia and Ethan had crafted. But the cracks in this narrative soon began to show. Detectives from the local police department were the first to pick up on the inconsistencies. The timeline of events simply didn't add up. Sylvia's initial claim that she had been upstairs at the time of the murder seemed implausible. The supposed burglar, who was never seen or heard, had left behind no trace of forced entry other than a broken window, a detail that, under further scrutiny, began to seem far too convenient. Items in the study were disarranged, but nothing of value had been taken, which only heightened suspicions of an inside job. Investigators soon found themselves questioning Sylvia's behavior. Despite the tragic loss of her husband, she appeared remarkably composed in public, almost too composed. Her carefully rehearsed grief did little to convince the detectives of her innocence. But it wasn't until they began examining the family's personal communications that the truth began to emerge. Hidden on Sylvia's phone were a series of voice recordings, conversations between Sylvia, Charles, and Ethan that were nothing short of damning. The recordings, captured through a voice-activated system in the Holden mansion, detailed the growing tension between the family members in the days leading up to the murder. One recording, in particular, stood out, a heated argument that took place just hours before Charles was killed. The sound of raised voices echoed through the mansion as Sylvia and Charles exchanged accusations of betrayal. Charles's fury was unmistakable as he accused Sylvia of destroying their family, of abandoning him for their son. His anger, raw and unfiltered, was palpable as he demanded to know how his wife could betray him in such a monstrous way. Sylvia, on the other hand, sounded defensive and panicked, trying to explain her actions, pleading with Charles to understand the loneliness and neglect she had felt in their marriage. She admitted to an affair, but she insisted that it had been a mistake, a desperate cry for attention that had spiraled out of control. But the most shocking part of the recordings was the final exchange between Sylvia and Ethan. In it, Ethan's voice trembled with guilt and rage as he confronted his mother about the pain he had caused. Sylvia's voice was softer, more pleading, as she begged him to stop, to calm down, but it was clear from the tone of her words that the emotional and physical nature of their relationship had crossed a dangerous line. The recordings revealed a twisted, codependent bond between mother and son, one that was as unhealthy as it was destructive. The detectives now had the proof they needed. The affair was not just an emotional connection, as Sylvia had claimed, but something far darker, something that would have devastating consequences. The relationship between Sylvia and Ethan had driven both of them to the edge, and now, with Charles's murder, it had destroyed the family forever. As the investigation unfolded, the public reaction grew even more intense. News outlets picked up on the recordings, airing parts of them on television and social media. Public opinion was divided. Some people expressed sympathy for Sylvia, claiming that she had been a victim of a loveless marriage and a cruel, neglectful husband. Others were horrified by the betrayal, by the knowledge that a mother and son could have descended into such depravity. The media, ever hungry for the next shocking revelation, pushed the family's darkest secrets into the spotlight for all to see. The Holden family's carefully crafted image of perfection was shattered beyond repair. As the investigation continued, it became clear that the truth was far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. The once revered family had been destroyed by a series of tragic, irreversible choices, and the town would never be the same again. The trial of Ethan Holden began on March 2, 2024, under the unrelenting glare of public scrutiny. The once revered Holden family, with its curated image of perfection, was now the subject of lurid tabloid headlines and endless speculation. Cameras flashed as Ethan, pale and gaunt, entered the courtroom, his hands cuffed and his face a mask of exhaustion. The prosecution wasted no time painting a harrowing picture. Assistant District Attorney Marcus Neville described Ethan as a cold-blooded killer, consumed by an unnatural obsession with his mother, Sylvia. Neville detailed the events of that fateful night, emphasizing the brutality of Charles Holden's murder, the shattered glass, the gory scene, and the frantic attempt to stage the crime as a burglary. The jury listened in stunned silence as Neville played audio recordings recovered from Charles's phone. In those recordings, Charles's booming voice filled the courtroom. "How could you betray me like this? My own son, my own wife." Ethan's trembling reply followed, his words a mixture of anger and desperation. "You don't know what it's been like. You never cared about any of us." The recordings culminated in the unmistakable sounds of a struggle, the crash of breaking glass, and Sylvia's terrified screams. It was a damning piece of evidence, one that left the jury visibly shaken. Ethan's defense attorney, Laura Prescott, presented a starkly different narrative. She painted Charles Holden as a domineering patriarch whose emotional neglect had left deep scars on his family. Prescott argued that Ethan's actions were not premeditated murder but the tragic result of years of manipulation and neglect. She described Ethan as a young man spiraling under the weight of his emotions and his mother's influence. Sylvia Holden, the central figure in the scandal, took the stand. Her testimony was a masterclass in ambiguity. Dressed in muted tones, she appeared fragile yet composed. She admitted to the affair, describing it as a desperate response to her loneliness in a cold, loveless marriage. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she said, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to feel loved." When pressed about her relationship with Ethan, Sylvia's responses grew evasive. The courtroom held its breath as she hesitated, her words laden with unspoken implications. Her testimony, meant to humanize her, only deepened the jury's unease. The trial dragged on for weeks, each day revealing more details about the Holden family's fractured dynamics. The defense argued that Ethan was a victim, caught in a web spun by an emotionally abusive father and an unstable, manipulative mother. The prosecution countered that Ethan was no victim but a dangerous young man who killed his father in a fit of jealousy and rage. Outside the courthouse, the public was equally divided. Protesters held signs that read, "Justice for Charles," and "Ethan is a victim." Social media became a battleground, with hashtags like #HoldenMurder and #FreeEthan trending daily. Podcasts, YouTube channels, and TV specials dissected every detail of the case, turning the trial into a national obsession. Opinion pieces flooded the internet, some portraying Ethan as a tragic figure, a product of his environment and upbringing. Others described him as a cold-hearted killer, a privileged son who believed he was above the law. Sylvia, too, became a lightning rod for public ire and fascination. Her defenders saw her as a victim of a toxic marriage, while critics labeled her a master manipulator who had orchestrated the entire tragedy. On June 15, 2024, the jury returned with their verdict. Ethan Holden was found guilty of manslaughter. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as the judge sentenced him to 12 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 8. For some, the sentence was too lenient. For others, it was a bittersweet acknowledgement of the complex circumstances surrounding the crime. Sylvia, though not criminally charged, faced the harsh judgment of public opinion. She withdrew from public life, retreating to an undisclosed location. The Holden mansion, once a symbol of wealth and success, was sold off, its grandeur forever tarnished by the events that unfolded within its walls. In the aftermath, the Holden case became a cultural touchstone, sparking debates about the pressures of family, wealth, and the dangers of secrecy. Documentaries and true crime specials dissected the case from every angle, turning the Holden tragedy into a cautionary tale. Ethan's name remains a polarizing one, his actions forever tied to the twisted relationships and hidden pain of his upbringing. Sylvia's role remains a subject of speculation, her true motivations and feelings obscured by layers of guilt and denial. The Holden story is more than just a tale of betrayal and murder. It is a chilling reminder of the fragile facade of perfection and the devastating consequences of love, obsession, and secrets too dark to bear. The Holden family tragedy is a harrowing tale of how deeply buried secrets and unchecked emotions can unravel even the most picture-perfect lives. What began as a facade of wealth and privilege crumbled under the weight of betrayal, obsession, and violence. Ethan's forbidden bond with his mother, Sylvia, was not just a relationship. It was a desperate cry for connection in a family where love was conditional and neglect ran deep. Charles Holden, the ambitious patriarch, may have built an empire, but his emotional absence created cracks that no amount of wealth could seal. Sylvia, trapped in a loveless marriage, made choices that not only betrayed her husband but also set the stage for a devastating loss that no one could have anticipated. Ethan, caught in a whirlwind of emotions, ultimately succumbed to the dark impulses born of his fractured upbringing. This case serves as a heartbreaking reminder of how secrets, obsession, and betrayal can destroy even the most seemingly perfect families. The Holden family's story is a testament to the devastating consequences of living lives bound by lies and the inability to confront the truth. Could this tragedy have been prevented if Ethan and Sylvia had come clean sooner? Or was it inevitable, given the family's dark secrets and twisted dynamics? These questions linger, a sobering reflection on the human capacity for both love and destruction. If this shocking story left you stunned, like and subscribe to True Crime Files HQ for more unsettling cases of love, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of the secrets we keep.